Wallace was married to a woman named Bianca. One afternoon, Wallace came home earlier than usual and found Jonas in bed with her. After the fallout, Jonas disappeared. The family cut all ties with him. As far as anyone knew, he was never seen or heard from again. That doesn't mean he wasn't missed. My grandmother, especially, never stopped carrying the weight of his absence. At every family dinner, she'd include him in her prayers, asking God to keep him safe, even though just hearing Jonas's name would send Wallace into a silent rage. He'd curse under his breath, slam his napkin down, and walk away from the table. Eventually, Wallace started arriving late to family gatherings, just so he could skip the prayer and avoid hearing Jonas's name. The years kept rolling on, and life moved with them. When I was 20, my father left my mother for a woman he worked with. Her husband found them not long after, and shot them both. My grandmother passed peacefully in her sleep 2 years later, when I was 22. Then, at 29, cancer took my mother. By 33, Uncle Wallace was the last of my close family. Not long after that, he was hit and killed by a drunk driver. What struck everyone at the funeral was the massive arrangement of flowers that arrived anonymously. The attached card bore only 2 words, "I'm sorry," and it was signed with a single letter, J. Then, when I was 35, I got a letter from a law firm, Barton, Murray, and Weston. They requested that I get in touch with them regarding an important matter. It turned out Jonas had died. He'd never married, never had children, and he'd named me as his sole beneficiary. The uncle I never knew had left me $11 million. I'd finished my civil engineering degree at the University of Michigan when I was 22, and I was already married by then. I met Morgan the very first day I stepped on campus. I was instantly taken by her. She was breathtaking, by far the most beautiful girl I had ever laid eyes on. I was only 18, but I could tell that if someone wasn't already chasing her, they would be soon. So I summoned every bit of confidence I had, walked right up to her, introduced myself, and asked if she wanted to have lunch. I was stunned when she agreed. That lunch led to a first date, then a second, and soon we were spending all our time together. One warm evening in June, we crossed a line and never looked back. From that night forward, we were practically glued to each other. I proposed to her on Christmas Eve, and she said yes. We both agreed to wait until after graduation before getting married. Everything felt perfect, until spring break. Some of her friends invited her to Florida for the week. She accepted. I was working part-time and couldn't afford the time off, so I stayed behind. I didn't want her to go, but I didn't try to stop her either. It was the longest stretch we'd been apart since we'd met. When she got back, things felt normal, at first. But soon, subtle shifts started to surface. She'd back out of plans last minute. If I suggested a movie or dinner, she'd say she had other things to do. Then whispers started floating around. Stories about her time in Florida, that she'd spent her nights with different guys. I didn't want to believe it, until one Saturday night forced me to. There was a party at Stella Hansen's house. I had to work, so I told Morgan I couldn't go. She said if I wasn't going, she'd skip it too, and we made plans to meet up the next day. That night, while I was bussing tables, a couple guys I knew came into the restaurant. One of them, Harry Short, looked surprised to see me and said, "Thought you were at Stella's." "Morgan's there. I just saw her." That didn't sit right with me. Morgan had said she wasn't going. Around 11, I left work early and headed over to Stella's. When I got there, I walked in just in time to see Morgan walking up the stairs, hand in hand with a guy I didn't recognize. I froze. For a few seconds, I just stood there. Then I followed them. I'd been in Stella's house before, so I knew the layout upstairs. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. When I got to the top, I saw both bathrooms and 2 of the bedrooms had open doors. Empty. No Morgan in sight. I might not be Sherlock Holmes, but it wasn't hard to piece it together. Only 2 doors were shut, and she was behind one of them, with him. The only question was, which one? I paused, trying to figure out which door to open. Just as I leaned in to listen, One of them swung open. Charlie Smithers and his girlfriend Donna stepped out. He gave me a knowing smile and said, "Looking for a room for you and Morgan?" I managed a polite grin and nodded like that had been my plan all along. Then I watched them head downstairs. I turned toward the last closed door but didn't move. If I had opened it right away, maybe they'd have just been talking. But now a few minutes had passed, enough time for things to get worse. I decided to wait a little longer, to give them the chance to realize what was coming. I wanted so badly to believe it was nothing, that maybe they'd just slipped away upstairs to escape the noise and talk in peace. That's the lie I fed myself, the one I kept repeating, hoping the universe might make it true. But the rumors swirling about what Morgan had been up to during spring break, and the way she clung to that guy's hand as they disappeared, left no room for hope. I lingered a little longer, trying to will myself into denial, then finally pushed the door open and went inside. She was there, doing exactly what I feared, like I never even mattered. Her eyes were closed, wrapped up in whatever she was feeling. I leaned in, close enough for her to hear me. "Morgan, baby, open your eyes. Here comes a surprise." Her eyes flew open. The moment she saw me, all the color drained from her face. "Keep the ring," I said, voice cold. I turned and walked away, her voice cracking behind me. She broke down instantly, sobbing, trying to say something like, "No, don't do this." But the door closed behind me before she could finish. As I descended the stairs, I spotted Nancy Newbert, the same girl who had dragged Morgan off to Florida in the first place. I didn't hesitate. "Thanks for the vacation invite," I said, walking straight up to her. If Morgan had stayed here, maybe I'd still believe she wasn't just another lying cheat. I didn't wait for a reply. I just walked out and left the party behind. The next day, I had work, and sometime around 2 in the afternoon, Morgan showed up and took a seat in my section. I ignored her like she wasn't even there. Technically, she was sitting at one of my tables, but I wasn't going to serve her. I asked another server to cover it. A minute later, he came back and said she'd specifically asked for me. That's why she chose that spot. I told him, "She can eat if she lets you take her order. If she's waiting on me, she's not eating at all." When my shift ended, she was leaning against the hood of my car. I walked past her like she was invisible. Just as I grabbed the door handle, she stepped away from the fender. "We have to talk, Ryan," she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't look at her. "I've heard more than enough, Morgan." "He's not my boyfriend," she said quickly. "That's what I came to tell you. There's more you need to know." I let out a dry, bitter laugh. "What? The truth about how many guys you hooked up with on your Florida trip? Or last night's pick? Maybe we can start with how you kept canceling on me afterward, every single time you couldn't make it out. You expect me to believe there was only one guy?" "That's not how it happened," she said firmly, "which is why I need to explain." "I don't want explanations. I don't want to see you. Just go, Morgan." "I won't walk away, Ryan. Not until you hear me out. If I have to follow you around or keep showing up, I'll do it. But you will listen to me." I didn't think I could handle her haunting me like that, like a shadow I couldn't shake. So I figured I might as well get it over with. "Fine," I said under my breath. "Get in. You have 10 minutes. After that, I don't ever want to see you again." She gave a small nod. "If that's what it takes, after you hear me." I got in and unlocked the door. She slid into the passenger seat and turned to face me. "First off," she began, "that guy from last night? He means nothing. You've always been the only one who mattered, Ryan." I opened my mouth to speak, but she held up a hand. "You gave me 10 minutes. Please let me finish before you say anything." She took a deep breath. "I met him at the party. He's actually the third guy I've been with since coming back." "Yeah," she admitted. "I met other guys on nights we were supposed to go out. Only 2 of them did it ever go that far with. Before Florida, I hadn't been with anyone else since I met you. I know people are talking, twisting things, but there weren't a dozen guys. There were 2. That's it. I wasn't a virgin when we met," she continued. I had one boyfriend before. We slept together a few times, 6 maybe, but it never meant anything. I didn't enjoy it. It was like that old song, "Is that all there is?" That's why I was so hesitant with you at first. She paused, then locked eyes with me. But when it finally happened between us, everything changed. You changed everything. It felt real, like finally it was what it was supposed to be. Things were perfect until Florida. What happened there wasn't something I planned. One night I got high at this beach party. A cute guy kept hitting on me, wouldn't stop, and I was messed up enough to start thinking, what if he's different too? Not like John, not like you. I got curious, and I told myself, Ryan's 2,000 miles away. He'll never find out. So I let it happen. He was different, yeah, but not like you. You're the one I want. You always have been. Not above you, not beneath you. Simply unlike you. The guy had this non-stop drive, like someone had installed a battery that refused to run out. A few evenings later, I met another guy, not earth-shattering, but intriguing enough to pique my interest. He wasn't you, and he wasn't like John or Troy either. Still, he didn't shake my world. Then, a couple of weeks after I got back home, Harry showed up. Because of what had gone down in Florida, I gave in to that restless wondering and went for it. It was fresh, unfamiliar, but not necessarily an upgrade. When it wrapped up and he left, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. 5 men, each with their own flavor, their own presence. And then Ralph appeared. Same deal. Not life-changing, just different. That's when I made up my mind. I'd keep going, maybe hit a dozen guys, just to scratch the itch fully before closing the book. Through it all, I never stopped believing I belonged with you. I never doubted that you were the one I saw a future with. But I had questions, and I convinced myself I could quietly chase the answers, without it ever reaching or hurting you. I was wrong about that. But it doesn't change what's true. I love you. You're still the one I want beside me for the long haul. She just sat there, saying nothing, eyes locked on mine, waiting to see how I'd respond. After a moment, I finally spoke. So what am I supposed to do with all that, Morgan? Say congratulations? Curiosity scratched, huh? I shot back, my voice tight. You expect me to act like none of it matters? Like it's just a phase, no harm done? Do you even hear yourself? No, Ryan, I'm not kidding myself, she replied, steady and clear. I don't know how many girls you were with before me. We've never dug into that. But don't pretend you've never looked at other women. I've seen how you watch Sally Jennings. And I've noticed your eyes linger on Marsha Moss. You've wondered too, haven't you? Maybe even imagined something. But you held back. Probably because you felt it'd be wrong to me. And I respect that. But the time to act on those questions, that pull, is before we're married. That's all I'm doing, Ryan. Making use of the fact that we're still not married. That we're both still technically free. All I'm saying is, this is the window, the one time in life to really figure ourselves out, before vows get in the way. I'm not saying I want to walk away from you. I'm asking you to try to understand. And if you feel the same pull, if you've got your own curiosity, then go for it. Just remember, I love you. I still want us to get married, if you're still willing. Go live a little, Ryan. Don't beat yourself up over it. She locked eyes with me. You're serious? I asked, still stunned. I am, she nodded. I want to explore what this feeling means, but I don't want to lose us. Maybe we could set boundaries. 2 weeks where it's just us, 2 weeks to ourselves, apart. Periods of being close, and then time to breathe, to reflect, to test things out. All I'm asking is that you trust me, that you believe I'll always come back, that we're still each other's person. Then she lifted her hand. I took off your ring, Ryan, but I didn't throw it away. I've been wearing it on a chain right here. She pointed to her chest. It still rests close to my heart, and one day I want to give it back to you, not as a goodbye, but for you to slip it onto my finger again. Please, just sit with it. Just think. I love you. I need you to trust that hasn't changed. She stepped out of my car, crossed to hers, gave me a soft kiss, then climbed in and drove away. Next chapter. Her words echoed in my head, and if I'm being honest, my initial reaction was anything but kind. More than once, the phrase, "screw that cheating bitch," rose like bile to the surface of my thoughts. But even through the anger, I couldn't pretend she hadn't made a few solid points. I had fantasized about Sally. I had entertained thoughts about Marcia, but I never acted on any of it. Because for me, acting on it meant betrayal. And you don't betray someone you genuinely love. But Morgan had. So, did that mean she didn't love me? Maybe I could swallow the first one. Troy, that party, too much alcohol, a moment of poor judgment. It happens. But a second guy? Then 3 more? Number that wasn't impulse. That was a pattern. That was intent. I went back to my place feeling like someone had just scraped my insides out. I sat on my couch in silence, eyes on the wall, not really seeing anything. Sulking wouldn't fix a thing. Yeah, she cheated. That stung. But life wasn't over. I wasn't exactly lacking in looks, and there were plenty of girls like Sally and Marcia around campus. Emotionally, it would take a while to bounce back, but I knew I would eventually. And as for Morgan, well, the urge for revenge had started to creep in. I might not act on it, but it was there. Lying in bed that night, revenge occupied my thoughts. The next day, in Markham's stats class, I was barely paying attention as he droned on about averages and probability curves when an idea clicked into place. Why not give her exactly what she asked for? Let her have her little plan, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, make her feel safe, let her think I was completely on board. And then, when the time came for her to ask me to put the ring back where it belonged, I'd smile, laugh in her face, and toss it in the trash right in front of her. So I made the call. That same night. "I've been thinking," I said. "Your idea. Maybe it's not as crazy as I first thought. I'm open to giving it a shot. But there's one condition." She stayed silent, waiting. "I never want to see you with another guy. Not ever. So we'll need to keep checking in constantly, even during our apart weeks, to avoid any ugly run-ins. No awkward scenes at parties or restaurants." And just like that, I agreed. Outwardly, I played along. But in the back of my mind, something else had already started to form. She played along. What made it even sweeter was how I managed to twist her own boundaries in my favor. I had a solid grasp on her favorite spots and the social scenes she refused to miss, so I made it a point to always arrive before she did. "Hey, gorgeous. Just wanted to give you a heads up. I'll be at David's party tomorrow." "Hey, Morgan. Just letting you know I've got plans. Taking someone to Augie's for dinner, then heading over to the pit for some dancing." I figured if she caught wind of me being at Dave's party or hanging at the pit, it'd throw her off just enough to take the shine off whatever date she was on. This became a pattern for 2 solid years. A stretch with Morgan, followed by breaks where I'd see other women. I never really had the chance to be with Sally, but Marcia did. There were at least half a dozen other girls, some amazing, others barely memorable. But even the least remarkable wasn't really a regret. The issue was, no matter how much I liked another girl, none of them held a candle to Morgan. I always looked forward to the weeks I had with her. I had no clue how she spent her time away from me, but my gut said that even if she was dating, it wasn't anything serious. She once mentioned she had a goal of dating 12 guys total, and at that point, she was at 7. A year into our arrangement, I teased her and asked how many she'd added, and she casually said she only had 3 left to go. Just 2 in a year? I was tempted to dig into how she picked them, but decided it was better not to ask. Then Reese Adler appeared, and everything flipped. Reese was stunning, bright, razor sharp, and strangely enough, she locked onto me. It was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Maybe pursued is a better word than stalked, but either way, she was already chasing me before I even learned her name. It all kicked off at a party Morgan had planned to attend. I'd gotten there early, leaning against a makeshift bar, beer in hand, when a fiery redhead walked up and greeted me. "I'm Reese," she said. I gave her my name, and she asked who I was with. I told her it was a friend's bachelor party. She flashed this wide, confident smile and said, "I came with a guy who turned out to be a complete idiot. You're cute, and I need a date for tomorrow. What do you say?" I figured, hey, I'm still vertical, still breathing. Why not? Sure, want to grab dinner? So we did. Ate, saw a show, went for drinks after. When I walked her to her door, she looked up at me and said, "If I really like someone, I kiss on the first date." Then she reached up and kissed me. She asked to see me again the next night. After our third outing, as I brought her home, she stared straight at me and said, "I don't play games, Ryan. When I want something, I go after it. And right now, I want you." She stepped inside, turned back. "You coming in?" I followed her and didn't leave until the sun came up. I was happy, spent, and completely hooked. If anyone had asked me in that moment what Morgan was up to, I probably would have blinked and asked, "Morgan who?" I had work that day, and for the first time in forever, I actually thought about calling in just to spend more time with Reese. But she already had plans, so I dragged myself into my shift. The whole weekend, I was bouncing between work and Reese's place. I didn't even step foot in my own apartment for 3 days. Monday, usually reserved for me and Morgan, came around, but Reese invited me to an art exhibit. So when Morgan called to ask when I'd be coming over, I told her I had other things going on. She went quiet. It was the first time I'd ever told her no. Then she asked, "How about tomorrow?" "I've got work." "Guess I'll wait for Wednesday then. I'll call you." "All right, babe. Love you. Bye." Wednesday came. Reese was busy that day, and I ended up forgetting to call Morgan. Thursday was packed with class and work. About 20 minutes before my shift ended, Reese walked in. I was at the library and had Kathy drop me off. "You can take me home." I don't know if that's a great idea. Every time I take you home, I'm a zombie the next day. Poor baby. Want mommy to go easy on you? I don't think you know how to go easy. All I know is, if I nod off during business law again, I'm done for. Okay, sweetheart, I promise. You'll sleep like a baby tonight. By Friday afternoon, I was walking out of my class when I saw Morgan standing in the hallway, waiting. "What's going on, Ryan? I haven't heard from you once this entire week." "I've just had a lot happening lately, Morgan." "Yeah? Like that redhead I saw you with last night?" "I stopped by the restaurant to see if you wanted to grab a drink after work. Instead, I caught you walking out with her. Her name's Reese. And yeah, we've been hanging out. That's supposed to be our time, Ryan. Maybe it is. But when I bumped into her, I couldn't exactly say, 'Sorry, I'm on hold with someone else right now.' I need space, Ryan. You'll have to tell her you're not available for a while." "I can't do that, Morgan." "Why not?" "Because I like her. There's something there. I want to see where it goes." "And me? What am I supposed to do?" "What do you want me to say?" "I never made any promises, Morgan. You talked about maybe giving me the ring back so I could wear it again, and I never guaranteed that'd happen. You were the one who brought up the week-by-week setup, and I went along with it. I agreed because I thought it might actually work, but even then, I knew either of us might meet someone else, just like you might run into some guy who makes you rethink this whole thing. You were so sure of yourself, Morgan, but your curiosity got in the way. You took a chance. It's always been a gamble, and right now the game's still going. When it's over, we'll know who wins. Maybe it'll be you, maybe not. So when do I see you again?" "I don't know. If I get a night free, I'll give you a call. If you're not already with someone, maybe we can meet." Damn it, Ryan, that's not right. This was never about replacing you. It was just a pause to see if what I'd been thinking about meant anything. Forget it. I've got to go. I'll be late to class. Next chapter. The rest of the week was a blur. School, work, and time spent with Reese. She had to leave for a family get-together that weekend. I had Saturday off, so I called Morgan on Friday. "Really, Ryan? You wait until now to reach out? I've already made Saturday plans." "All right then. Have a good night. Talk to you later. Bye." Saturday night, I wound up at a party over at Delta's place. Marcia was there, you know, the tall one, and after her boyfriend had a little too much to drink, she asked me for a ride home. I dropped her off around 11 in the morning and swung by the village inn for breakfast before heading back. Morgan's car was parked in front of my building, and as I pulled in beside her, she stepped out and waited. I tried calling you 5 times last night. I canceled my plan so I could see you, and still, nothing. I looked her in the eye and lied without hesitation. Didn't make a difference. You told me you were busy, so after we hung up, I called someone else. I had a date lined up before you even canceled yours. With who? That's not something you need to know, Morgan. I've never asked you for names, and I'm not about to start giving you mine. Fine, whatever. She hesitated, then asked, "Since I'm already here, can I come in?" Once we were inside, she reached for me right away, but I gently moved her hand aside. Her expression shifted. "Have you ever come to me straight from being with someone else?" "Jesus, Ryan, I'd never do that." "And neither would I. You'll have to wait until I've had a shower." She said, "I'll wash your back." Later, lying in bed together, Morgan whispered, "I'm not some slut." "I never said you were." "No, but the way you talk, you make it sound like that's what you think." It's only been 3 guys since we started this arrangement, and none lasted more than a couple of days. Almost 2 years and just 3? At that rate, you'll be in your 40s before you hit a dozen. I'm not going to 12, Ryan. Curiosity's over and done. Each one was different, sure, but none of them made me feel what I feel with you. I'm finished chasing maybes, Ryan. She unclasped the chain from around her neck and held it out to me. The ring I gave her dangled from the end. Extending it toward me, she said, "Please, Ryan, just take it." I looked at it for a moment, then gently pushed it back into her hand. "I can't, Morgan. Please. You know I love you. And what does that change? You were saying that long before I ever gave you that ring, and still you cheated. Twice in Florida. Once again after you got back. If I hadn't found out, you'd probably still be at it, telling me you love me while sneaking around behind my back. I don't want a fiancé like that. If this is how you've felt all along, why didn't you just end things?" "Because you were the most attractive woman I'd ever dated. And when you came up with that weekly rotation for us, I saw a loophole, an easy out. It let me keep things exciting without really committing. You became my safety net. If things didn't work out with someone else, I knew you'd still be there when your turn came around. So you never planned to propose again, did you?" "Number. If it had only been that first guy in Florida and you'd told me the truth right away, maybe we could have worked through it. But that's not how it happened. You chose to sleep with someone else on purpose while you were down there, and then you kept going after you got back. Like I said, if I hadn't caught you at Stella's party, you'd probably still be sneaking around, chasing that so-called curiosity. That's not fair, Ryan. If I were really doing what you think, wouldn't the number be way higher than just 3 guys in 2 years? I only have your word that it was 3. For all I know, it could have been 100. Saying it was 3 just makes you seem a little less desperate for attention. Think what you want, Ryan, but it really was only those 3. Ryan, please. I love you, and you know it. No one else has ever mattered to me. Don't shut me out like this. I'm not shutting you out, Morgan. I'm just not marrying you. You're still the best I've ever had in bed, and you're welcome to keep that going if you want. But that's all it'll be. Just casual. No promises. I won't have a shot at changing your mind if I leave, so I guess I'll have to stay and accept that. Over the next 2 weeks, whenever I wasn't with Reese, I was with Morgan. She wasn't exactly thrilled about me seeing Reese, but she understood the situation. She knew the choice. Either deal with it or walk away, and I was certain she'd stick around. Maybe that made me an asshole. I probably earned the title. I knew she loved me deeply, and I used that to my advantage. I never questioned how real her feelings were. I also knew she'd hang on to the very end, doing everything she could to win me back. And as long as she was in the picture, I never had to worry about being alone. Whatever happened with other women didn't matter. Morgan was my constant. The only catch? I was in love with her, that maddening, complicated woman. I loved her. But I also believed the saying I'd heard all my life. Once a cheater, always a cheater. And she had cheated. Next chapter. Reese began dropping hints that she wanted to take our relationship to the next level, but I wasn't interested. Sure, she was stunning, amazing in bed, and always up for a good time. but I couldn't picture a future with her. She once told me she always got her way. That was her motto. With Reese, it was her way or nothing. I knew I couldn't build a life with someone like that, so I kept dodging her hints, until the day she flat out told me to keep Saturday open so we could shop for engagement rings. I told her, "Reese, I'm not ready for something like that." "I am," she replied. "We don't have to get married right away, just after we graduate. There's still a lot to plan. I already asked my mom to start helping. I saw the exact ring I want at Zales. They open at 10 on Saturdays," she said, "so we can either sleep in or grab breakfast first." "Did you even hear me?" I asked. "I said I'm not ready to make that kind of commitment." "What's there to think about, Ryan? We are getting married." "I'm not ready for marriage, Reese." "Well, I am, so we need to move forward." I hesitated for a second, weighing my options. Do I end things now and give up everything we had, or drag it out and make it worse? I decided to rip the Band-Aid off. "Reese," I said, "it's not just that I'm not ready. I'm never going to marry you." Her eyes went wide. "What the hell are you talking about?" "It's exactly what it sounds like. You're too controlling. That's manageable in something casual, but in a marriage, we'd be at each other's throats within months." A few more words were exchanged, none of them important, and then she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Next chapter. After Reese was out of the picture, I started spending more and more time with Morgan. Naturally, she took that as a sign that she was winning me over, and I didn't correct her. She was determined to prove she was mine, and only mine. And by the time graduation rolled around, she'd succeeded. I slipped the ring onto her finger. 1 month after graduation, we got married. The next 5 years felt like something out of a dream. We both advanced in our careers and had what seemed to be a perfect marriage. But then, one Monday in June, everything started to fall apart. I was supposed to fly to Detroit that morning for a major client meeting. I was already at the airport, standing in line to check in, when my phone rang. It was my boss. He told me to push the flight back to later that evening. He had some last-minute updates to go over with me. He'd invited me to join him for lunch at the Marriott, so we could go over the revisions ahead of the Detroit meeting. I didn't call Morgan. She was already at the office and knew I'd be gone for the next few days. During our meal, as Jack and I walked through the presentation updates he wanted covered, something odd caught my eye. From where we sat, I had a clear line of sight into the lobby, and that's when I saw Morgan walk in, accompanied by a man I didn't recognize. They made their way together to the reception desk. A few moments later, they headed toward the elevators and vanished inside. I excused myself, crossed the dining area, and approached the front desk. I asked the clerk for the names of the couple who had just checked in. He started to object, quoting hotel privacy rules, but I slid a 50 across the counter. Was this risky? Almost certainly, but not immediately. Not today. The receptionist hesitated, then took the bill and passed me a copy of their registration form. The name listed was Mr. and Mrs. William Sherman. I jotted down everything from the slip, thanked him politely, and returned to my table with Jack. Once we finished eating and wrapped up our discussion, I noticed I still had 4 hours before I needed to be at the airport. I stopped by the hotel shop, picked up the latest Robert B. Parker paperback, and settled into a seat in the lobby, keeping watch on the elevator bank. I barely read a page at a time. Each ding of the elevator pulled my eyes away. Close to 4 hours had crawled by, and I was almost ready to give up when the elevator doors opened, and there they were, Morgan and Sherman. I stood up and walked toward them. "Bill Sherman?" I said, reaching out my hand. He shook it, clearly confused. I smiled warmly and added, "Wow, Bill, it's been what? Years? And is this your wife? Looks like she's adjusting nicely. You're lucky. She's gorgeous. Anyway, good bumping into you." Then I said, "I've got a flight to catch," and walked away, leaving Morgan looking shell-shocked and Sherman visibly baffled. I didn't reach out to Morgan after landing in Detroit. I never gave her my hotel details or contact information. The meetings went off without a hitch, and 3 days later, I boarded my return flight. I landed just after 10:30 p.m., and checked into a hotel for the night. The next morning, I headed into the office to brief Jack on how things had gone in Detroit. After that, I took the rest of the day off. At 1 p.m., I was sitting across from William Miglio at Morrissey Investigations. I handed over everything I'd collected on William Sherman and asked Miglio to dig deep. His job, his marital status, any detail that could be relevant in the context of a divorce. From there, I made a stop at our bank. I closed out all the accounts Morgan and I shared and emptied the safe deposit box. Every asset was moved into new accounts in my name alone. In our state, there's no requirement to prove fault in divorce. Sooner or later, Morgan and I would be dividing things up. But I wasn't willing to risk letting her get control of the finances in the meantime. After that, I headed home. Morgan wasn't back yet, so I took the chance to move my clothes and belongings out of the master bedroom and into one of the guest rooms. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and went out to the patio. It was a beautiful house, and that patio had always been one of my favorite spots, bordered with flowers and perfect for sunsets. I knew I'd miss it. Unless, of course, Morgan agreed to let me buy her out, which I doubted, since she loved the place too. I was halfway through my beer and watching the last light disappear when I heard her come in. She joined me outside, easing herself into one of the chairs. "You never called," she said. "There wasn't a reason to," I answered. "It's not what you think," she started to say. "I don't want to have this conversation right now," I cut in. "Keep whatever explanation you've got until Tuesday." "Why Tuesday?" she asked, confused. "Because I won't have made up my mind until then." "I don't understand." "You don't have to," I said evenly. "We can't just ignore this, Ryan. We need to talk about it." "Tuesday," I said again. "Come on, Ryan." "Tuesday," I repeated, more firmly this time. I stood up and went back inside. I hadn't unpacked, so I grabbed my overnight bag and made my way toward the door. "Where are you going?" she called after me. "I told you Tuesday. But if you can't wait, then I'll leave. I'll come back Tuesday." I walked out, checked into a motel, and spent the weekend mostly poolside, keeping to myself. On Tuesday afternoon, I met again with Miglio, then drove back home. Morgan was already there. Either she'd taken time off or just come home early. She was waiting outside when I pulled into the driveway. I let my bag drop by the entrance and headed straight for the kitchen, pulling a beer from the fridge. After cracking it open, I sat down at the table, waiting for Morgan to appear. When she finally took a seat across from me, I leaned forward. "Okay, Morgan," I began. "Say what you want, but before you get into your version, let me run through what I already know. Save us both the lies. I'd been having lunch with Jack when I caught sight of you and that so-called boyfriend of yours walking into a hotel together. I watched you two step into the elevator, then wandered over to the front desk. The guy there said you'd checked in under the name Mr. and Mrs. William Sherman. You both went upstairs and didn't come back down for 4 hours. When you finally reappeared, there were no bags, no boxes. Certainly nothing suggesting you'd spent the time playing Scrabble or Monopoly. So tell me, why shouldn't I believe you were up there having a good time with Mr. Sherman? It's not what it looks like, Ryan. He's not my boyfriend. I don't need one. I've got you. Then spell it out, Morgan. What exactly went on for those 4 hours? It didn't mean anything, Ryan. I love you. You know that. I show you that every single day. I'm still waiting, Morgan. It wasn't anything important. It has nothing to do with how I feel about you. One last shot. Tell me what really happened with your pretend husband upstairs. Either be honest now or I'm done. Nothing happened, Ryan. It meant absolutely nothing. I pushed my chair back and started to rise. That's when she blurted out, "I was just curious, that's all. That's the only reason. It meant nothing, I swear. I love you, Ryan. That's never changed. It never will." "You keep saying that," I replied. "If it really meant nothing, why can't you just tell me what you did?" She turned her face away and muttered, "I went to find out if what they say about him was true. And since that's something you can confirm in less than 2 minutes in a broom closet, why'd you need 4 hours?" Her voice dropped. "I just wanted to know. Everyone talked about him. I had to find out for myself. He means nothing to me. I don't care about him. It was just once, I swear, just curiosity. That was when everything spilled out. Sherman, it turned out, worked with her. The guy had a reputation, supposedly the office Casanova. Married women, single women, it didn't matter. They all whispered about him like he was some kind of legend. I needed to see for myself, Ryan. I had to know if it was true. And naturally, I said, you decided to take him for a spin. She kept her eyes glued to the floor, unable to look up. Did it ever cross your mind, I asked, that if he's hooking up with half the women at your job, he's probably chasing down anything with a pulse? Did you stop to think that someone that reckless might bring something home and pass it on to someone just as reckless as you? We've gone through this kind of thing before, Morgan. I truly believed you'd learned from it, but maybe I was wrong. I should have known better. Once someone crosses that line, they never really come back. And even knowing that, I still forgave you. Maybe that made you think I always would. If so, maybe I'm the real idiot in this story. What happens now? She whispered. It's not about what I'm going to do, I said quietly. It's about what you're going to do. I should kick you out on the spot, but I won't. Not yet. I know you love me, so I'm giving you one last chance. Just one. And it comes with two conditions. First, since Sherman's married, you and I are calling him and his wife. You're going to tell her exactly what you did, and about the other women he's been with too. I can't do that. You will, or you can start packing. And that's just the beginning, I continued. Second, you're getting tested for STDs. If the results come back clean, you stay. If not, you're gone. I won't risk my health because you got curious. What if I say no? You don't get to. We're leaving in 20 minutes to go see the Shermans. If you're not in the car when I start it, I'll take that as your answer. Her voice trembled. If I do go with you, and the test comes back bad, if Bill gave me something, are you really going to leave me? Exactly. Can't we wait for the test before wrecking his marriage? I mean, I don't care about him, but why drag his wife into it if I'm already leaving? You still don't get it. If he passed something to you, then he passed it to her too. Or he will eventually. She deserves to know. I checked the time. You've got 10 minutes. Be in the car or start packing. The evening with the Shermans unraveled into chaos. The moment Mrs. Sherman found out her husband had been a little too chummy with his female colleagues, her fury was palpable. I stayed back, a silent spectator to the storm brewing in their living room. I didn't even flinch when she lunged at Morgan, slapping her hard and ripping out a clump of her hair. Honestly, I had to stifle a laugh when Mr. Sherman, ever the diplomat, tried to mediate and ended up doubled over from a well-placed knee to the crotch. While he writhed on the floor, I stood up, smoothed my shirt, and declared, "Well, my work here is done," then made my way to the door. Just as I reached the hallway, Mrs. Sherman barked, "Hey, you forgetting something?" I turned around just in time to see her shove Morgan so hard she stumbled right toward me. "Take that floozy with you," she snarled, then pivoted and delivered another brutal kick to her husband's already battered groin. The drive back was deathly quiet. Morgan didn't say a word, and the moment we got home, she vanished into the bedroom without so much as a glance. The following morning, she asked why I hadn't come to bed. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her straight, I'd be sleeping in one of the guest rooms from now on. "I'm not touching you, Morgan," I said, "not until a doctor clears you completely." That never happened. Turned out she'd picked up syphilis from her little tryst, a parting gift from none other than Mr. Sherman, or as I'd taken to calling him, Mr. Bastard. Morgan sobbed, begged for forgiveness, swore up and down that it meant nothing. I didn't budge. I filed the divorce papers, and nothing she said or did could stop it. Chapter 2. I was 27 years old, freshly divorced, and 6 months removed from a lifeless marriage. I hadn't been with anyone in half a year, partly because of court dates, partly because I was recovering from the biological fallout Morgan left me with. But I was ready to start over. And thankfully, that didn't take much effort. Plenty of friends were eager to introduce me to someone new, a fresh start, a clean slate. I had some charm left in me, and soon enough, I wasn't spending my weekends alone. Still, I carried a strange contradiction. I missed being married. I wanted that kind of connection again. But here was the catch. If a woman slept with me too quickly, I couldn't see her as someone I'd ever settle down with. So I kept chasing. I'd pursue women until we slept together, then quietly cross them off the list of long-term potential. But if the chase didn't lead anywhere, I lost interest fast and moved on to someone more promising. It was a cycle, pointless, predictable, until a spilled cup of coffee shifted everything. I was having breakfast at Patty Ann's cafe like I usually did. Walked in, grabbed my regular booth, and unfolded the paper. The hostess, who knew my order by heart, skipped the pleasantries. She just brought coffee with cream, no questions asked. I was halfway into the sports section when I heard a startled yelp, followed by hot liquid flooding my lap. I jumped up, patting my soaked pants with napkins, as a panicked voice blurted out, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry! I tripped on the rug!" I looked up and froze. I was staring into the most mesmerizing blue eyes I'd ever seen. Her face looked like it had been airbrushed by angels, and a quick glance confirmed the rest of her matched. Jessica, the cafe's owner, rushed over with a damp towel and a smirk. "Looks like you've met our new waitress," she said. The girl, Annie, was clearly mortified. "It's fine," I said, waving her off. "I'll head home and change before work. No harm done." "I'll cover your breakfast," she insisted, still flustered. Jessica chimed in. "You really ought to report that carpet to Angie. Ryan's never going to fix it unless someone makes a fuss." Annie's expression said it all. She was terrified I'd rat her out. Jessica caught on and added, "Not you, Annie. The rug. People have been tripping over it for months." I offered a deal. "Tell Angie I took the fall. Keeps you out of it." Annie visibly relaxed, until I added, "But there's a condition." She froze again. "Someday," I said, "after we know each other a bit, you owe me dinner." Jessica chuckled. "Relax, hun. I've had dinner with him. He's safe, and surprisingly fun." For the next 2 weeks, I made sure I always ended up in Annie's section whenever I stopped by Patty Ann's. We started chatting, joking around, building a rhythm. Then, on a Friday morning, I figured it was time. "I think you owe me a dinner," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you what now?" "The meal," I grinned. "Don't think I forgot." Her lips curled into a smile. "I was wondering how long it would take you." "So is that a yes?" "A deal's a deal," she said. "And debts don't cancel themselves." Annie wasn't just beautiful. She was quick-witted, genuinely funny, and had this magnetic warmth about her. We clicked over everything: music, movies, books, even sports. And though we didn't rush into anything physical, I wasn't in a hurry. I just liked being near her. We had those long, ridiculous conversations where time didn't matter, like two teenagers discovering the magic of connection for the first time. Then, on our 6th date, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "All right, enough flirting. Take me home." From that night on, we were inseparable, and every evening ended the same way, in her bed, like she was determined to make up for lost time. There were evenings when I'd show up at her apartment for our plans, only for us to never make it out the door. Sometimes she'd greet me at the entrance wearing nothing except high heels. 6 months after our first date, I asked her to marry me. She said yes. Just 4 days before the wedding, I had my bachelor party. The following night, her friends held one for her. The evening after that, I went to see her. She opened the door, handed me back the engagement ring, and said, "I can't marry you, Ryan. I've met someone else." Before I could say a word, she shut the door. I stood there, stunned, unable to move. I knocked, loud and persistent, for nearly 10 minutes. No answer. Eventually, a neighbor emerged and told me that, if I didn't stop, the police would be involved. The next day, Jessica, our mutual friend and someone I worked with, told me Annie had resigned without warning or explanation. That night, I went back to her place. She was gone. It would be weeks before I uncovered the truth. During the bachelorette party, her friends took her bar hopping. The drinks kept coming. At some point, Annie excused herself to use the restroom. When 30 minutes passed and she didn't return, a few of her friends went to check on her. They found her in a secluded room, in a situation she hadn't intended or asked for. After that night, she couldn't face me again, so she disappeared. I tried to find her, but no one had any answers. I wrote to her constantly, told her I still loved her, told her we could work through it. She never wrote back. For the next 4 years, I kept things light, no attachments, no commitments. Eventually, I met someone who made me want more. Ironically, she didn't feel the same. Her name was Cherie. Winning her over wasn't easy. It took months before she agreed to go out with me. We had dinner and then caught a show. She appeared to enjoy herself, so I asked if she'd like to go out again. Her answer? It was a nice night, Ryan, but we'd only be wasting each other's time. I don't see this turning into anything. You really think that? After just one date? I trust my instincts, she said. They're usually spot on. Usually doesn't mean this isn't one of the exceptions. She didn't budge, but I didn't give up either. 2 months later, I persuaded her to give me another shot. That led to a third date, then a fourth. Before long, we were seeing each other often. Things evolved, and eventually we became lovers, where I discovered Cherie was unlike anyone I'd been with. She kept me guessing in the best ways. Every night she revealed a different side of herself, and each one was perfect. For over a year, everything felt right. I proposed. Her response wasn't what I expected. I'm not ready for that, she said. I wanted more time, but I guess now's the right moment after all. To do what? I asked. To end this. What did I do wrong? Nothing. You've been amazing, one of the best partners I've had, but I've never stayed with a man longer than a year. She told me she'd already been looking for someone new for the past month. I'm not made for monogamy, she said. If I ever settle down, it'll be with someone who's okay with me sleeping around. He'll have to tolerate my contempt and accept that I can't respect a man who'd let me walk all over him just to keep me. We had something good, she added, but it's over now. I started questioning everything. I had no trouble attracting women. Getting them into bed wasn't an issue. Some even stuck around. But the ones I actually wanted, they always left. After Cherie, I unraveled, fell back into that pit of self-loathing. That's where I was when Barton, Murray, and Weston called. Inheriting a fortune from someone like my Uncle Jonas, it changes your life. The first shift, my career. I genuinely loved the work I did, but I loathed the people running the company. Their father had built it with grit and vision. When he died, his sons, who had no business taking over, drove it straight into the ground. The place went from being something I took pride in to a job I dreaded. So I walked away, started my own firm, took the smartest people from the old company with me. When the dust settled, I had 2/3 of their clients and none of their mess. After things ended with Morgan, I was left with little choice but to sell our house and downsize to a condo. Naturally, I wanted a fresh start, so I joined a country club and purchased a grand 6-bedroom home that offered a panoramic view of the golf course. My truck, a nearly new 3/4-ton Chevy with 4-wheel drive, was still in great shape, so there was no urgency to replace it. With the money I inherited from Uncle Jonas, I was finally free to pursue the kinds of experiences I had long fantasized about, but couldn't previously afford. I started going to symphony performances, exploring art exhibitions featuring up-and-coming talent, and treated myself to a private skybox with season tickets for both baseball and soccer games. Before long, my days became packed with philanthropic commitments and board meetings for local charities. I even enrolled in university courses again. The first time around, I'd only been able to afford the basics, whatever was required for my degree. But now, with finances no longer a constraint, I had the freedom to take the classes I had always been curious about. There was a catch, though. I kept my upgraded lifestyle under wraps. By the time Uncle Jonas's inheritance came through, I had grown wary of romantic relationships. I didn't want to attract women who feigned affection only to empty my wallet and vanish. Even so, I wasn't looking to live in total isolation. I wanted female companionship, someone to talk to share moments with, without the complications of entanglement or financial risk. That question, how to find a woman for meaningful company without it spiraling into drama, was still lingering in my mind when one of the charities I worked with began organizing a major fundraising gala. A well-known novelist had agreed to speak and distribute signed copies of his latest book. The tickets were steep, $200 per person, but every dollar was going toward a good cause. It was the sort of high society function where showing up alone wasn't exactly ideal. I hadn't dated anyone since things fizzled out with Cherie and didn't have anyone suitable in mind. When fellow committee member Mike Devins asked what time I planned to arrive, I admitted I wasn't going. He asked why, and I told him I didn't want to show up without a date or scramble to find one last minute. "That's an easy fix," he said, handing me a card from his wallet. I looked down. Premier Escorts. "I'm not paying for a hooker," I said. "They're not all like that," he replied. "Places like Premier are legit. They screen their people carefully." He shared that he'd used their services more than once and had never had an issue. I thought about it. What harm could it do? The following day, I called Premier and scheduled an in-person appointment that afternoon. What followed wasn't anything like I'd anticipated. They had me fill out an in-depth application that included references from both my personal and professional life, along with a personality profile. Once I finished the paperwork, they escorted me to a private booth equipped with a screen and notepad. A video started playing, featuring introductions from various women. I assumed the interviewer used that time to contact my references. I made notes on 3 women who caught my attention. When the video ended, I handed over my choices. Interestingly, the woman conducting my interview, who wasn't part of the video lineup, would have been my top pick if she had been. She typed a few things into her system and informed me that Melissa and Karen were already booked that evening. But Ellen, my third choice, was still available. "Ellen it is," I said without hesitation. We settled on a fee, and I had the option of either picking her up at the agency or arranging to meet elsewhere. Picking her up at home wasn't allowed, which was perfectly fine by me. I chose to collect her from the agency at 6 p.m. on Friday. When I arrived, Ellen stunned me. Her photos hadn't come close to doing her justice. She wore a sleek black cocktail dress and high heels, and she was absolutely striking. Her profile said she was 23, though she could easily pass for someone just out of high school. She had that ideal combination of the wholesome girl next door and the bubbly cheerleader. With her by my side, I knew heads would turn. It was the kind of scene where everyone would instantly understand what I saw in her, but wonder what she saw in me. I was 13 years older than Ellen, but I kept myself in shape and figured I looked a good 5 years younger than my actual age. As long as Mike was the only person who knew her real role, speculation was inevitable. The evening itself went off without a hitch. Ellen was intelligent, poised, and played her part to perfection. On the way to the event, she asked, "Does anyone know I'm an escort?" "No," I told her. "Do you want anyone to know?" She followed up. I took a moment, then said, "Absolutely not." "Then we should get our story straight," she said. "People are going to ask how we met, how long we've been together, stuff like that." We created a plausible backstory, which turned out to be a wise move. Less than 5 minutes after we walked in, Betsy Newman approached us and asked how we'd met. Without missing a beat, Ellen replied, "I tapped the back of his truck by accident in a library parking lot. I left a note with my number, he called, and one thing led to another. Now here we are." I grinned and added, "Best minor accident I've ever had." As part of the evening's festivities, everyone received a raffle ticket for a chance to win a signed first edition from the guest author. To my surprise, my number was called. On the drive over, Ellen and I had been chatting about the author, and I discovered she was a big fan. I gave my ticket to Ellen instead of using it myself, and sent her off to get the book autographed. The author included a brief personal note, and Ellen thanked me, then wondered aloud why I didn't want a signed copy of my own. I lied and said that, since I was part of the organizing committee, it didn't feel appropriate. The real reason? I'd read 2 of the author's earlier books and hadn't liked either. Later, over dinner, I suggested we grab a drink. She agreed. That didn't surprise me. She had promised to spend a few hours with me that evening, and we still had time. We ended up walking into Sardi's. When our server, a woman named Giselle, came by, Ellen ordered a cosmopolitan. I asked for my usual. It looked like a vodka tonic with lime, but it was really just water with a lime slice. I had a personal rule against drinking and driving, but I'd learned that asking for soda while others were drinking tended to make people uncomfortable. It could give off the wrong impression, as if I were recovering from something. Once our drinks arrived, I started steering the conversation toward her work, specifically the more logistical aspects of escorting. Not the cliché, moralizing stuff, but the nuts and bolts of how it functioned. At first, she was guarded. I got the impression she suspected I was trying to suss out whether she was only in it for the money. So I clarified my intentions. I told her I was genuinely trying to understand if having a recurring arrangement with one escort was even possible. In other words, could someone like me see the same person regularly? Or was it always luck of the draw with whomever the agency had available? It depends, she said. Depends how? I asked. Say I wanted someone every Thursday or Saturday night. Then you could request her for those days, if she's still with the agency, she explained. But if you call last minute, like Tuesday for Thursday, it's all about whether she's already booked. Why the interest? She asked me. I told her I'd been thinking about using the service more frequently and worried that arriving at social events with a different woman each time might come across poorly. I didn't want to give off the wrong impression. How far ahead do you usually know your schedule? She asked. Most of the time, a week or 2 out, I answered. Sometimes just a couple of days. A week's notice usually gives you a good shot at getting who you want, she said. Less than that, it's hit or miss. I asked her if I could make an arrangement directly with someone after a date, bypassing the agency. She said no. It always had to go through official channels. A girl might already be booked and not even know it yet. We talked a while longer before I gave her a ride back to the agency so she could pick up her car. Next chapter. Life gradually settled back into its regular flow. I kept up with work, signed up for night classes, subjects I'd been interested in during college but never had the time to explore, and stayed active with the committees I was part of. I went on a few dates here and there, but nothing serious ever came from them. Still, it wasn't like I was alone. A friend of mine introduced me to a high-end escort, and for $1,500 a week, my needs were met. Her name was Tasha. She made such an impression on me that I even floated the idea of becoming exclusive. She politely declined. She admitted she still felt like Morgan deep down and wasn't ready to give that up. I'm too curious, she told me. I'd lose that if I tied myself to one man. I often called the agency to ask for Ellen, and whenever she was available, we had a great time. On a couple of occasions, she wasn't. Once I saw Melissa, another time it was Karen. They were both perfectly nice, but the connection wasn't the same. Ellen lingered in my thoughts. She had a rare combination, intelligent, charming, easy to talk to, and I couldn't understand why someone hadn't already locked her down. Maybe she had a husband and just didn't wear a ring, but that theory didn't feel right. Even though we'd spent a fair amount of time together, the nature of our relationship didn't lend itself to asking personal questions like that. Eventually, things started going south with the agency. 4 times in a row, I reached out for a date, and each time Ellen wasn't free. The other women filled the role, but something was missing. The spark wasn't there. Next chapter. When fall semester began, I signed up for a course I'd always wanted to take. It was only offered Monday and Thursday afternoons. One of the perks of being the boss was that I could rearrange my schedule, so I made it work and registered. On the second day, I arrived on campus early and wandered over to the student union to grab a coffee and a slice of pie. After paying, I looked around and spotted Ellen sitting by herself, buried in a book. I walked over and sat across from her. At first, she glanced up with a look of mild irritation until she recognized me. Then her expression changed. She smiled. "What brings you here?" she asked. "I've got a class at 2, I told her. "Saw you sitting here and thought I'd say hi. I can leave you alone if you're busy." "No, it's okay," she said. "I'm just trying to get ahead on today's reading for Professor Reynolds. I didn't know you were taking classes here." "Same, I had no idea you were a student," I said. We started chatting, and I learned she was working toward a degree in business management. She'd been chipping away at it for 3 years and figured it would take her another 3 to finish. "Why so long?" I asked. "Time and money, those are always my biggest limitations. To keep my daytime schedule open for classes, I have to work nights. But pulling full night shifts on a regular basis isn't realistic, not when I also need time to study, write essays, and keep up with assignments. The escort business can be profitable when work comes in, but covering my bills and tuition with that income is like walking a tightrope. Some semesters, I can only afford to take 1 or 2 classes. That's why it's taking me so long to finish my degree. You think the money's good? Sure, when there's work. You don't earn anything for being available. If no one calls, you go home empty-handed. There are weeks when I get 3 or 4 bookings, and those are great. But then there are stretches when I barely get a single job, or none at all. The unpredictability means I have to be extremely careful about how I budget." I checked the time. It was almost time for class. I told Ellen we'd talk later, got up, and left. On the walk back, an idea started to take shape. By the time I clocked in for work the following day, it had become a solid plan. I picked up my phone and called Premier. I asked to schedule Ellen for next Tuesday. They confirmed she was free. I also left a note. Casual clothes were fine, jeans were perfect. She was to meet me at the Texas Steakhouse on Bromley Lane. I was already in a booth when she walked in. She slid into the seat across from me, raising a questioning brow. "What's going on?" she asked. "This is a business meeting," I said. "In jeans? Why me? Aren't you the one majoring in business?" "Exactly," I replied, "and your perspective is exactly what I need." "On escorting?" she asked, clearly confused. "Just go with it for now. Trust me, it'll make sense. Let's enjoy the food first." Over dinner, we chatted about school. I told her why I was enrolled in certain classes, and she nodded along, saying it made sense. There were courses she'd have liked to take too, but they didn't count toward her degree requirements. After the main course, we ordered a bit of Bailey's, and that's when I shifted gears. "Okay," I said, "let's talk business. Where's this meeting happening?" "Right here," I said. She gave me a look. "I'm not following. Think back to our first time out. I mentioned how much it matters to me to have consistency when I hire an escort. Sometimes I've been able to book you, but other times you're not available. Last week, you talked about how unstable the job can be, how hard it is to make a plan financially when some weeks are packed and others are dead. That stuck with me, so I have a proposal." Her face shifted. "I don't think I'm interested in going down that path." "Wait, don't turn it down yet. Hear me out first. I've always kept things respectful between us," I continued. "Not because I haven't thought about more, but because I value boundaries. This is something different. I want to hire you as my full-time companion. No more rolling the dice with who's available through the agency." "You'd be on payroll," I explained. "Full-time salary, health coverage, paid vacation, sick leave, retirement benefits. You'd have some holidays off, but others would require your presence, depending on what events I'm attending. Is that something you'd think about?" "It's intriguing," she said. "The benefits sound amazing. But what kind of salary are we talking?" "How much did you make last year?" I asked. "That's complicated," she said. "How so?" "There's the amount Premier reported to the IRS, and then there's the rest." "Okay, give me the total," I said. "From Premier, I made just over $39,000, she said. "And beyond that?" "I'm going to be straight with you, Ryan, and I hope it doesn't change how you see me. I earned another $30,000 from extras." "Extras?" I repeated. "Some clients wanted more than just a date," she said softly. It took a second to fully register. "Oh," I said. She looked directly at me. "You wouldn't know because I don't talk about it. I only offer that when someone specifically asks, and even then, not always. I watched her carefully. That doesn't change anything for me, I said. The offer still stands. We'll just need to sort out the details. So let me get this straight, she said. You're offering me $70,000 a year to be your exclusive companion? Not exactly, I replied. I'm offering $40,000 annually, and you'd also work as my personal assistant. I appreciate the opportunity, Ryan, but I have to decline. Why's that? It comes down to finances. Unless I'm getting paid off the books, which isn't something I can rely on, especially since that depends entirely on the client's discretion. And let's be honest, clients like you typically don't go there. My net earnings last week totaled a mere $29. After covering rent, utilities, my car payments and insurance, food, and basic necessities like professional clothing, I'm left with zero. That modest paycheck also has to fund my education. And like I said, the income isn't predictable. So if the pay situation were different, would that affect your decision? Definitely. A steady paycheck would bring much-needed structure to my life. I wouldn't have to sit around waiting for last-minute job offers. Just having reliable money coming in would take a huge load off my shoulders. But what you're offering doesn't work with the reality I'm living in. If I give up escorting, I lose the flexibility of unreported income, and that's what helps keep me in school. Getting my degree is my path out of this cycle. It's how I'll launch a real career, build credibility, advance professionally, and eventually earn a salary I can actually live on. I watched her carefully, thinking through everything she had just shared, and finally replied, 40 is the highest I can go without having to start explaining things to people. But there might be alternatives. Like what? Well, how important is it to you to have your own space, to live alone? She gave me a curious look. Why are you asking that? I'm just trying to find out whether you'd be open to changing your living situation if the right setup came along. I don't know yet. Let me lay it all out and you can take your time to consider. I own a 6-bedroom house over in Regency Park. One of the rooms is my home office. You could take one of the other bedrooms, and I'd turn the room next to it into your personal workspace. You wouldn't have to worry about rent or utility bills. I'd also provide a company vehicle and a gas card, so you could sell your car. No more monthly payments or insurance costs. When it comes to school, I'd take care of tuition and books. You'd spend most evenings with me, freeing up your days for classes. That way, you could finally take a full course load instead of barely managing a few credits. Just think about it. I'll schedule something for Saturday night through the agency, and we can go over everything. I could tell she had a dozen questions brewing, but I didn't want to dive into those until she'd had time to really think things through. Driving away from the steakhouse, I found myself wondering whether I truly knew what I was getting into. And the honest answer? I didn't. Did any of it make logical sense? I usually booked an escort 4 times a month at $400 a visit. That's $1,600 a month, or $19,200 a year. So why was I considering spending twice that just to see one woman exclusively? I wasn't in a relationship. There was nothing stopping me from seeing someone different every week. But the idea of showing up at work events with someone like Ellen made me realize I'd need to have a convincing backstory. That night, I fell asleep, still second-guessing my actions. But by the time Saturday rolled around and Ellen and I met again, I had dissected every angle of the proposal. And the truth was painfully simple. I enjoyed being around her. Her presence was easy, even comforting. She was breathtaking, and being with someone like her reflected well on me. That, in itself, might have justified the expense. And as for the money, I could afford it. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. But beyond all that, there was something more, a quiet truth I hadn't wanted to face. Even after everything, I still wanted Ellen, not just for business. I wanted her in a personal way. But I understood that wasn't realistic, not the way I envisioned. A woman like her wouldn't seriously consider someone my age. I couldn't have her completely, but I could have her near. And that counted for something. She'd once hinted that she occasionally offered extras to certain clients. Maybe that door was slightly open, but I wasn't going to walk through it. Crossing that line would shift our entire relationship, and I didn't want to ruin what we had. If I ever needed a purely physical arrangement, Tasha was still around. That dynamic worked for what it was. "So, how do you feel about what I suggested?" I asked Ellen as we sat together in a quiet restaurant. "There's definitely a lot of potential," she said. "It would allow me to focus on school in a way I haven't been able to. But I do have a few big concerns." "Like what?" "Well, suppose I give up my apartment, cut ties with the agency, and then you change your mind in a month. What then? I'd be left without a place to live, no job, and a class schedule I can't keep up with while scrambling to find income again." I didn't like hearing her bring up the possibility of having a boyfriend, but I had to stay composed. It was a reality I needed to be prepared for. "To put your mind at ease," I told her, "I'll draw up a formal contract, a legal agreement with a 2-year term and penalties if either of us tries to back out early. That should give you enough time to finish your degree and figure out what's next. If you commit to a full-time academic schedule, there's a good chance you'll finish your program within 12 to 18 months. Giving yourself a full 2 years would offer a bit more flexibility. Once those 2 years are up, we can revisit the idea of you completing your degree. As for your second point, I don't anticipate any complications. The company already holds a corporate account with Best Western, and I'll make sure your name is included on the approved user list. If bringing guests to the house doesn't sit well with you, you're more than welcome to stay there instead. Is there anything else bothering you? What should I tell my mom? That's entirely up to you. Say whatever feels right. Just keep me updated so I can step in and support your story if needed. Maybe go with something simple, like I hired you to watch the house while I'm traveling for work." By that evening, she'd decided that was the version she'd stick with. Come Monday, she gave her notice at the agency and informed her landlord she wouldn't be extending the lease. 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday, I helped her move into a home in Regency Park. Just like that, we turned the page. The next morning, Thursday, I started questioning whether agreeing to this setup with Ellen had been a smart move. As usual, I got up at 5 a.m. and headed downstairs to the home gym for my workout. To my surprise, Ellen was already down there, working up a sweat on the Stairmaster. But what really took me off guard came later, involving the country club. I'd added her to my membership as a family member. One Saturday around noon, she strolled out of her room and casually announced she was off to lounge by the club pool. Wearing that? Of course, why not? Is it a problem? Only that you might cause a few retirees to go into cardiac arrest. Let's just hope the lifeguards don't forget their actual jobs once they see you walk in. You sure know how to lay it on thick. Moving right along. 2 months passed without much friction. I saw Ellen about twice a week, usually for dinner on the weekends. She seemed completely at ease, and our home life was peaceful. She certainly tested my willpower, but I kept things on the level. Still, I started spending more time with Tasha. The only hiccup came from my accountant. He flagged the arrangement as legally questionable if I ran it through the business. I finally told him, "Figure it out. Whatever needs to happen, paperwork, taxes, legal details, just get it done." I even yelled at him, "It's my money, I'll spend it however I damn well please." At a fundraiser one night, Monica Coyce was chatting with Ellen and me when she abruptly asked, "So Ryan, when are you going to put a ring on that finger?" Ellen laughed and shot back, "He's too scared. Thinks he's too old for me." "Oh really?" Monica asked, clearly intrigued. "Not even close," Ellen replied with a smile. "You'd better move fast, Ryan, or she's going to slip away." Once Monica walked off, Ellen leaned toward me. "We go to these events together all the time. Maybe wearing a ring wouldn't be such a bad idea, just for optics." "And what was that line about me thinking I'm too old?" I needed a quick explanation, she shrugged. "It was the first thing that came to mind. But just so you know, you're not like the others." "I'm not?" "Nope, like I told Monica, you're different." The next day was Saturday. I took Ellen to a jewelry store. She initially gravitated toward something modest and inexpensive, but I shook my head. "If we're doing this, let's do it right. Pick something with at least a half carat." "Are you sure?" she asked. "I don't want anyone thinking I skimp when it comes to my girl." She finally chose a simple solitaire, half carat, set in platinum. It fit like it was made for her, and she wore it right out of the store. We stopped for lunch, and over coffee, Ellen leaned in. "Can I ask you something a little personal?" "Of course." "What are we doing here exactly? I mean, you could have just about any woman. Why choose me? Why is this ring on my finger instead of someone else's? Someone you actually intend to marry? What's really going on, Ryan?" I sat in silence for a moment, weighing the options, lie or tell the truth. In the end, I went with the truth. I needed someone to play a certain part in my life, and over time I realized I'm the kind of guy who needs a woman around, but I don't trust women anymore. Then I told her everything, the whole messy story about Morgan, about Cherie. "I can't go through that again," I said. "So for me, this setup, it makes the most sense." She looked at me steadily. "Then tell me this. If all that's true, why didn't you take things further with me? I told you up front that sometimes I provide extras. You never once took me up on it. Why?" I gave her my reasons, and as I spoke, she looked at me like I'd just sprouted a second head. "I know you have needs, Ryan," she said, glancing meaningfully at my jeans. "I just can't imagine a man like you settling for nothing more than his own hand." "I'm fine," I answered, my voice steady, then brought up my regular appointments with Tasha. "And you're okay with that being your life from now on?" she asked. I just shrugged and motioned for the bill. She didn't say much on the ride back. When we got home, she picked up her keys and mentioned she was heading out to shop. A few hours later, she returned, made dinner, and we ate early. Afterward, she vanished into her room to work on a paper due next week. I spent the evening flipping through channels before eventually heading to bed. The next morning, I woke up alone. After a shower, I went into the kitchen for coffee. Ellen was already there, cooking breakfast. She came over and kissed me. "If you're dumb enough to turn me down, I'll drop it. But if you don't protest, get used to sharing your bed." "Why now?" I asked. "And why keep it going?" "There are a few reasons," she said. "First, I'm healthy, and between school and our setup, I haven't had the time or drive to date anyone. I usually wait for clients to take the first step. With you, that rule almost broke me." "I kept hoping you'd say something," she continued. "Then when you asked me to move in, I thought for sure that first night would lead to something more. But it didn't. And last night, I finally got it. So I made a choice. If you weren't going to act, I would. I took the lead. And here we are." From that night forward, Ellen stopped sleeping in her room and moved into mine. Next chapter. For the next half year, we lived like husband and wife, just without the legal document. At social events, people would notice her ring and start asking when the wedding would be. She always gave the same answer. Not until after graduation. The idea of her walking across that stage and away from me churned my stomach. I lived in fear that once she had her degree, she'd leave. I never lied to myself. I was in love with her. I didn't want to lose her. But I was still scared. Scared of being burned again. Scared of handing over my trust completely. Still, a voice inside me kept whispering, "Ellen isn't like the others." She had always approached what we had as something functional, yes, but intimate too, something grounded in shared benefit. Despite that, my fear of losing her eclipsed everything else, so I made up my mind. We were at a charity event for the Salvation Army, talking with Horace Briscoe, when his wife Gail came over and smiled. "So, have you two set a date yet?" she asked. Before Ellen could give her usual response, I cut in. "She's graduating in May. We're thinking June for the wedding. Not sure yet if it'll be the first or second weekend. I'm keeping both open. Invitations go out in May." Ellen froze beside me, clearly stunned. Horace and Gail smiled warmly and moved on. She turned to me, her expression unreadable. "Did I miss something? I don't remember us setting a date, or were you planning on proposing in my sleep?" "Maybe I did," I said, offering a small smile. "You've been wearing the ring. I wouldn't have put it on if you hadn't said yes, at least in some way." You're being serious? Dead serious. But you told me once you didn't trust women anymore, that you wouldn't risk getting hurt again. That was before you, I said. Then I realized something. If I didn't do this, you'd graduate, move on, and I'd be left behind. That terrified me. I didn't have the courage to ask you straight out, so I did it this way. Don't you think we should have had this conversation before you said something to Horace and Gail? What if I'd said no? What if I didn't want to marry you? But why would you say no? I asked. You've been telling people for months we'd get married after you graduate. Well, graduation's right around the corner now, and you're still dodging the real question, Ryan. What if I'm not ready? What if I don't want this? Then I guess you don't, I said quietly. And what makes you so sure I would say yes? Because you seem happy here, living with me, being in my bed. I figured, if we've already built this life together, why not just make it official? But what we've had so far, this setup, it's not the same as being married. It is to me, I replied. We live under the same roof. We look out for each other. In all the ways that count, we already are. When it comes to intimacy, we're practically inseparable. We've developed the kind of daily patterns most married couples fall into, sharing chores, late-night meals, even grocery runs. Ellen, we do all of it together. So don't tell me what we have isn't like a marriage. I love the life we've built. I want to keep building it. But to hold on to it, I need you to become my wife, before you decide to walk away. This isn't the right moment for that conversation, Ryan, she replied quietly. Let's wait until we're home. The ride back was silent. Ellen stared out the window, not saying a word. When we arrived, she went straight to the living room and lowered herself onto the couch. I sat beside her. Then she turned to me and said, I don't want to marry Ryan. She hesitated, then corrected herself. No, that's not quite it. I just don't want to get married right now. I've spent years working toward my degree, building the foundation for a life that's truly mine, one that isn't defined by a man. I want a career, independence, stability that's my own. I want to wake up and not worry about looking nice for some guy I barely know, or faking laughter over drinks with someone who reeks of cheap cologne and stale breath. I want to walk home after work and actually feel like I can breathe. No more pretending. No more makeup or hairdos to impress someone I won't remember. Ryan, what I've been reaching for is a life where men aren't the focus, at least for now. It's not that I hate them. I don't hate you. I just need time away from all of it. These past 4 years have been all about pleasing men. Every week it was someone new. Sometimes 1, sometimes 2, even 5. Dates I couldn't say no to because I needed the money. But now, I need a period of my life where I don't owe anyone anything. I need time that's mine alone. I listened. I truly did. I understood everything she was saying, and still, it hurt. It was happening again. Another woman I cared about, who couldn't give me what I wanted in return. And worse, I had walked straight into it. I'd sworn I'd never let someone in deep enough to break me. That was why I'd turned to escorts in the first place. And now, the pain was all mine to carry. She must have seen the shift in my expression, because she added gently, This isn't your fault, Ryan. I'm just not ready. It means so much to me that you love me enough to want this. But I can't say yes. I didn't argue, just gave a small shrug, stood up, and left the room. I let the hot water run over me in the shower before heading to bed. Later, she came to my room. We both knew how it would end. Nothing's changed, Ryan, she whispered. But it had. Everything had. She would be leaving. This one felt worse than it had with Morgan or Annie or Cherie. Those endings had come swiftly. Sharp, clean breaks. Painful, sure, but over quickly. With Ellen, it was slow. 7 months of a goodbye stretched thin, wearing me down a little more each day. And once she was gone, God knows how long it would take to feel okay again. I wasn't built for this. I finally saw that. I couldn't sit by and watch her fade out of my life inch by inch. The next morning at breakfast, I asked, Have you thought about where you'll live once you're on your own? She looked a little surprised. Not really, I've still got time. Why? I gave her a soft smile. Well, ta-da. Thought maybe we could go check out some places this weekend. She stared at me for a long time before answering. You don't have to do this, Ryan. I do, I said. Once you graduate, this is over, and I can't wait around, unraveling bit by bit, knowing the end's already written. I have to start stepping back now, start healing. Nothing else changes between us, but instead of living here, you'll have your own space. I'll cover the rent and utilities for the first year. Everything else stays as it is. She set her fork down slowly. All right, if that's what you need. Then she stood, scraped her plate into the sink, turned on the disposal, and walked out of the room without looking back. Next chapter. That night she stayed in her room. On Saturday morning, as we sat at the table, she handed me a neatly written list of apartments she wanted to tour. By early afternoon, she'd settled on the fourth one we saw. We reviewed the lease, and she signed it. I paid for the full year up front, along with the deposit. From breakfast to lease signing, we might have said 75 words, if that. The ride home was silent again. Back at the house, I handed her a credit card. You're going to need to furnish the place. Dishes, furniture, curtains. Get whatever you think you'll need. She glanced down at the card. Is there a spending limit? Buy whatever you want. As long as you're not picking out gold-covered furniture, you won't come close to maxing it out. She gave me a look I couldn't quite read, then turned and walked away. About half an hour later, I heard the front door close behind her. She hadn't come home by the time I went to bed, and when I woke up the next morning, her side of the bed was still untouched. I could hear water running in the bathroom, the shower's distant rhythm echoing faintly through the hallway. So I knew she'd returned at some point. While I stood in the kitchen making coffee, the garage door opened and closed again, and it dawned on me that she'd already left the house. Later, I got in touch with a couple of friends and met them at the country club. We played a full round of golf, followed by a long, leisurely lunch. When I finally made it back home, I noticed my credit card placed on the kitchen table, and resting right on top of it was the engagement ring I'd once bought for Ellen. She didn't come home that night either. The following evening, I returned from work to find the house just as empty. By Monday, when there was still no sign of her, I walked into her room, and every trace of her was gone. Her belongings, all of them, had vanished. I called her cell, she answered. Hey, I said quietly, where have you been? You told me to go, she replied. So I did. What nights do you want me this week? I wanted to reply to every word, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I don't have anything going on, she added. Phone's on. Call if you need me. All right, I said, then ended the call. I had gotten exactly what I claimed I wanted. Space, distance, her absence, but it felt like I was being torn apart inside. Over the next week, I started adjusting to mornings without her there. But it wasn't just her absence, it was the silence, the isolation that crept in when the sun came up. That Monday, I got to campus early, grabbed some coffee and pie at the cafeteria, and that's when I saw her. Ellen. She walked in beside some guy. They got in line together. As she reached the cashier, she spotted me. Her eyes met mine briefly. Then she paid and walked away, taking a seat with him on the far side of the room. I finished my drink and went straight to class without looking back. On Tuesday afternoon, Stu Miller called, inviting me to a cocktail party that Friday. I accepted. I reached for the phone, half ready to call Ellen, but stopped myself. Instead, I rang up Premiere and found out Melissa was available. We made plans. At the party, several guests seemed surprised when I showed up with Melissa instead of Ellen. Horace and Gail were among them, and I could see Gail watching me with barely disguised curiosity, like she was restraining herself from walking over to ask the question that was clearly on her mind. And honestly, it was probably better that she didn't. I wouldn't have known how to answer her anyway. I tried to stay occupied that weekend, but the house made it difficult. Every corner, every room still carried traces of her. I pushed through it the best I could, told myself this would pass too, just another thing to survive. By Monday, I made it a point to avoid the cafeteria altogether. Figured the best way to avoid seeing her was to keep my distance. Work got busier. Some major projects needed attention, and I buried myself in them. That distraction, small as it was, helped keep Ellen out of my head for short stretches. By Wednesday night, I couldn't handle the solitude again, so I called Premier. They sent over Tracy, a polished brunette with presence and charm. She clung to my arm all evening, almost as if marking territory. Horace wasn't there, but Gail was. I caught her watching me again, curious, concerned, and full of questions she wasn't voicing. By Thursday, the emptiness had returned in full force. I reached out to Tasha, asked if she wanted to get dinner. She agreed. We had a meal and caught a show afterward. At some point, she asked what I'd been up to, said she hadn't seen me around in a while. Tasha was always easy to talk to, one of the reasons I'd once considered making her more than just a friend. So I told her everything. About Ellen. How it started, how it all began to fall apart. She listened without judgment, then gently offered to help distract me, to take my mind off Ellen. But nothing she said or did could pull me away from those thoughts. It wasn't even about what Ellen had done. It was the idea that she could have done things differently, and that I would have noticed. As I got ready to leave, Tasha turned to me and said, "I like spending time with you, Ryan. I'm not trying to push you away, but if you really care about this woman the way you say you do, you need to do something about it." She continued, "Reach out to her. Let her know you still care, but respect her boundaries too. I've been there. Sometimes a woman just needs space to figure herself out." "She's not done with you," Tasha said, "but she's not ready for forever either. Give her room, stay connected. Be someone she can still rely on, but don't smother her." She hesitated, then added, "I don't know if I'm saying this right, but there's that saying, if you love something, let it go. If it comes back, it was always yours. If it doesn't, it never was." Friday came, and with it, the Arts Council meeting. I was curious to see how things would unfold, especially since Gail was part of the group. Sure enough, after the meeting ended, she made a direct line for me and asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I couldn't really refuse without being rude, so I said yes. I'd been bracing for this moment, so when she finally asked what had happened to Ellen, where she'd gone, I was ready with an answer. I shrugged and said, "She told me she needed space. I haven't heard from her in 3 weeks." Gail just looked at me. "Why would she do that?" "Something deep inside tells me she's having doubts about marrying me. I can't quite articulate it, just an instinct I can't shake. But I only began noticing the shift once we started organizing the actual wedding. That's when she began to retreat, needing time to herself." Gail had simply shrugged and said, "I get it. I was a nervous wreck before my own wedding too. More than once, I seriously thought about vanishing into the wilderness for a while." "Hang in there, Ryan. It'll all work out," she added reassuringly. That Saturday, I slept in later than usual. Didn't drag myself out of bed until 9. I settled at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, leafing through the sports section when the phone rang. I reached for the cordless phone and answered, "Hello?" "Morning, Ryan. Ellen, good to hear your voice. You might have heard it sooner if you'd just picked up the phone once in a while." "Phones go both ways, Ellen, like you just proved." "That's an odd thing to say." "Is it? You acted like I was the last person you wanted to speak to. Why would I be the one to call?" "That's ridiculous. What made you think I didn't want to talk?" "Well, let's break it down. You vanished for 2 weeks without a single call. You moved out without a word. I had to do some digging just to figure out where you'd gone. And let's not forget that day in the cafeteria. You picked the farthest table from me like you were deliberately avoiding me. From my perspective, all that screamed, 'Leave me alone.' So I did. Is that why you went through the agency instead of just reaching out to me directly?" "That was part of it. I've told you, nothing's changed apart from us living separately. I still see myself as your partner when you need someone. There was no real need to bring an agency into it. Maybe not. But once you were gone, and I really understood why you'd left, I figured it would be healthier if I just moved forward." It doesn't have to be that way. For my own peace of mind, Ryan, I think it does. I'm sorry. Ellen, I need to clear something up. That day in the cafeteria, it wasn't me avoiding you. Paul and I are working together on a business strategies group project. There's 5 of us, and we picked that spot to go over our part of the assignment. Paul chose the table, not me, and honestly, I wasn't even sure if you wanted to talk. It felt like you were in a hurry to erase me, finding me a new place, ushering me out. Oh, Ryan, you know why I helped you find that apartment. We talked about it before we even began the search. We did, but I don't think I fully grasped it then. And to be honest, I'm still not sure I do. All I ever said was I wasn't ready to get married, that I needed time to live independently, to figure things out on my own, without any romantic ties. That doesn't mean I stopped caring. I never said I was cutting you out of my life forever. I told you I needed space. Don't you remember what you said after it ended with Cherie? You didn't want to see anyone for a while. That's kind of how I feel now. Not about men in general, but about my work as an escort. I just need distance, some time off. It's not forever. I get that, Ellen. I really do. But it doesn't make this easier. You're not at fault. This is on me. I let myself fall for you. I thought maybe hiring an escort instead of dating would spare me the emotional risk, but I ended up hoping someone might actually love me back. And it was me who chose you from that agency video. That was my decision, not yours. Take care, Ryan. I truly hope you find happiness. Goodbye. I ended the call and just sat there, still holding the receiver. It wasn't long before a wave of self-pity washed over me. By midday, that had shifted into a burning frustration, mostly aimed at myself, for letting things spiral like this when I had the means to turn it around. Next chapter. What good is money if you don't use it when you actually need to? I made 4 quick calls. First, I rang Tasha, asked if she was free for the week. Second, I called Bill Perkins, told him he'd be stepping in to run the company while I was away. Third, I got in touch with a private charter service at the airport. And last, I booked a suite at a resort in Cabo San Lucas. By 6 that evening, Tasha and I were soaring at 20,000 feet, champagne flutes in hand, on a Learjet headed south for a sun-drenched Thanksgiving escape. No obligations, no worries. Our days were packed with sailing, snorkeling, paragliding, and soaking up the sun. And every night, Tasha made sure I knew just how much she appreciated the 5-star getaway. Truthfully, I didn't think about Ellen once, not until we were on our way back, just as the landing gear jammed on approach. And even then, she only came to mind because Tasha looked at me and asked, "So what did you end up doing about Ellen?" I gave a faint smile and said, "I followed your advice, sweetheart." I released her hand, letting her go without another word. She gave it a soft pat and remained quiet. As I accompanied her to the exit, she leaned in, kissed me gently, and just before stepping outside said, "If you ever feel like settling on one guy, don't forget about me, all right?" "You'll be Ryan's top pick," I replied with a grin. "You have my word." The next few weeks went by in a blur, and the only event I showed up for, I attended solo. I'd made up my mind. As long as Tasha was still unattached, I wasn't getting involved with anyone else. It wasn't that women weren't interested, they were. But I was worn down by the constant emotional toll of starting over. Putting in all that effort, only to watch it unravel again. It didn't feel worth it anymore. Then December arrived, and with it, our annual holiday party. I booked a ballroom at the Hilton, secured a live band, and personally took care of all the food arrangements. A few of the women from the office volunteered to handle the decorations, so I handed them a company card and gave them full creative control. They transformed the space with garlands, streamers, and a large Christmas tree in the corner, neatly surrounded by colorfully wrapped presents. My assistant, Mona, organized a secret Santa exchange, capping the gifts at $10. I drew Carol's name and bought her a CD by her favorite singer. It was a little over budget, but I doubted anyone would object. After we finished eating, I stood to deliver a brief speech, just a simple thank you to everyone for helping make it a successful year. Then, I pulled out a surprise, holiday bonus checks for everyone, which took them completely by surprise. Mona took over from there, passing out the gifts under the tree. When she called my name, I got up, walked over, and she handed me a small box. Back at my seat, I opened it to find a hotel key card resting in cotton, with a sticky note attached. Room 412. I glanced around the room. No one appeared to be watching me. I slipped the key into my pocket, unsure of what, or who, might be waiting upstairs. Still, I couldn't vanish from my own party. As the band started playing their first set, another surprise was in store. One by one, every woman at the party began approaching my table. Leading them was Mona, who asked me to stand. I rose, bewildered, and she leaned in to kiss my cheek. "Merry Christmas, boss," she said, stepping aside as Cherie from accounting came forward to do the same. Next was Allison, one of the women who had helped decorate. She laughed at my puzzled look and gestured upward. I tilted my head back. A large bunch of mistletoe hung above me. Mona and Cherie were both married. Allison wasn't. As she walked off, I found myself wondering if she was the one behind the room key. The idea faded when the line ended and everyone returned to their seats. The last woman to approach was Bianca, one of our field engineers. She was married too, but she'd come to the party alone. By the time she reached me, the dance floor was filling up, the music loud, and nobody noticed when she kissed me softly. She gave me a wicked little smile and whispered, "See you later, handsome." The moment she said it, room 412 popped into my mind again. Then Mona grabbed me and pulled me onto the dance floor. The rest of the evening became a blur of music and motion, dancing with woman after woman. Of them all, Bianca was the most forward. After one song, she leaned in close and asked, "Care to meet me under the mistletoe again?" "I'd love to," I said truthfully. "But what about your husband?" "He's not here," she said, "and you are." And that was the problem. I did want her, badly, but she had a ring on her finger, and she worked for me. I couldn't cross that line. I refused to become the kind of man who did to others what had once been done to me. Even setting morality aside, getting involved with someone on the company payroll was asking for trouble. Then a darker thought struck me. What if she was the one in room 412? "That's not something I should do," I told her. "After that kiss and the way we danced, I'd want more, and I can't go there." "If you're worried about Tom," she said casually, "don't be. I'll tell him everything when I get home. He won't care." "That's just part of it, Bianca. If you quit and joined Loomis and Bainbridge or any other firm, and Tom himself gave me his blessing, then maybe I'd chase after you like a dog after a steak. But I won't get into anything with a married woman, especially one who works for me, no matter how tempting you are." She gave a playful shrug, stuck out her tongue, and said, "You're no fun, party boy. You'll never know what you missed. I love this job. I'm not going anywhere." I just chuckled and escorted her back to her seat. About an hour later, the party began winding down. People started heading out, and the question hit me hard. Should I go to room 412 or not? What if Bianca really was up there? Could I turn her away again? I'd already told her no once tonight, but if I opened that door and found her waiting, I knew I'd have to say it again. And for all the same reasons. There was a certain inevitability to it. Whoever was on the other side of that door was probably someone from the office, which meant another awkward rejection was looming. Easiest thing would have been to steer clear altogether. That would have been the logical move. But who was I fooling? There was no reality in which I wasn't going to see what room 412 was hiding. Maybe I was reading too much into it. For all I knew, there weren't any women waiting. Could have just been some co-workers trying to keep the night going a little longer. But curiosity had me by the collar, and it wasn't letting go. I started making my way to the exit of the ballroom. On my way out, I noticed Mona off to the side, deep in a phone call. She caught my eye and sent me a quick wave as I passed. When I reached room 412, I paused for a moment and leaned in, trying to catch a sound, any sign of life behind the door. Nothing. Maybe things had wound down already, Or maybe the walls were thick enough to mute everything inside. I took a steadying breath, swiped the key card, and turned the handle. What I walked into hit me like a brick. The last person I expected was there, waiting. Ellen, stretched across the bed, locked eyes with me. "Took you long enough, Ryan," she said. I stood frozen. The weight of the night and the shock of seeing her here had scrambled my thoughts. I asked what she was doing in the room. Her gaze was steady as she answered, "I had a moment of clarity, Ryan. I realized I was pushing you away, and if I kept it up, one day I'd look around and you'd be gone for good. And all this so-called freedom I thought I wanted? It would mean nothing without you in my life. I couldn't let that happen." She offered a quiet smile. "So, here I am, and if you're wondering how this all came together, you might want to thank Mona. This was her idea too." I blinked, confused. "Wait a minute, how do you know Mona?" Ellen let out a warm laugh. "Ryan, I've been around your office, remember? I had to fill out a ton of forms. Mona was the one handling all that paperwork. I also came in regularly to pick up my checks. Mona figured out who I was pretty quickly, and surprisingly, she was thrilled about you. We hit it off right away, started having lunch every week. Sometimes we'd even grab drinks with some of the other women in your department. I've gotten close with them. Today, they all helped me set this up. Their job was to get your attention. Don't tell me you were just sitting around all night waiting for something to happen." I gave her a look. She laughed again. "Relax. Mona texted me when you were headed this way so I could be ready." "Well then," I said, "I guess I owe Mona a serious thank you." Ellen's eyes lit up. "Maybe an invitation to the wedding would be a good start?" I laughed. "That depends. Are we actually having one?" She tilted her head and gave me a mock stern look. "Getting cold feet already?" I shook mine. "Not at all. It just feels like something's out of order." "Like what?" she asked, eyebrows raised. I met her gaze. "Shouldn't I propose before you say yes?" I stepped away from the bed, sank down on one knee, and gently took her hand. "Ellen," I said, "will you marry me?" She didn't answer right away, just smiled, savoring the moment. "That's a big question, Ryan. I'll need the night to think about it. I'll give you my answer in the morning. But in the meantime, get back up here. I've got something else I need your help with." She said yes. And yes, Mona was at the wedding, as Ellen's maid of honor. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the force be with you. See you soon, my friend.